David Johnson checked his watch as he walked through the glass doors of Premier National Bank. It was 2:30 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, and the downtown branch was buzzing with activity. People rushed in and out, trying to finish their banking before the weekend. David had been here many times before, but today felt different somehow. He had important business to take care of. At 42 years old, David was the kind of man who commanded respect wherever he went. His success hadn't come overnight. He'd built his tech company, Digital Bridge Solutions, from the ground up. Starting in his garage 12 years ago with just a laptop and a dream, he'd grown it into one of the city's most promising technology firms. Today, his company employed over 3,000 people and was known for creating software that helped businesses run better. David straightened his navy blue suit jacket as he looked around the busy bank lobby. The marble floors gleamed under the bright lights, and the sound of conversations mixed with the clicking of heels and dress shoes. He'd always been particular about his appearance. His father had taught him that presentation mattered in business, and David never forgot that lesson. His suit was perfectly pressed, his shoes were polished, and his briefcase contained documents that could change everything. The line at the teller windows was longer than usual. David didn't mind waiting. He used the time to review emails on his phone, responding to messages from his team back at the office. His assistant had confirmed his afternoon appointments, and everything was running smoothly. This bank visit was supposed to be quick and simple, just like the dozens of others he'd made over the years. As he waited, David noticed the usual mix of customers around him. There was an elderly woman counting bills in her purse, a young couple discussing their mortgage payments, and a businessman tapping his foot impatiently while checking his phone. Everyone seemed to be in their own world, focused on their personal banking needs. David's company had been growing faster than he'd ever imagined. Just last month, they'd signed 3 new major contracts. The software they developed helped banks and financial institutions modernize their systems. It was complicated work, but David had assembled a team of brilliant programmers and designers who could solve problems that seemed impossible to others. The line moved slowly but steadily. David found himself thinking about his journey to this moment. He remembered the early days when he'd worked 18-hour shifts, surviving on coffee and determination. His wife had supported him through those difficult times, never complaining when he missed dinner or worked through weekends. She understood his vision and believed in what he was trying to build. Now, years later, that vision had become reality. Digital Bridge Solutions was respected throughout the industry. They'd won awards for innovation and had been featured in several business magazines. David was proud of what his team had accomplished, but he never forgot where he came from. He made sure to hire people from all backgrounds and give them opportunities to grow. As the line continued to move forward, David glanced at his briefcase. Inside were documents that represented months of hard work and negotiations. His legal team had spent countless hours reviewing every detail. His technical team had prepared presentations that showcased their capabilities. Everything was ready for what could be the biggest deal in his company's history. The bank's air conditioning hummed quietly overhead, providing relief from the warm afternoon outside. David could see through the large windows to the busy street beyond. Cars moved slowly in the Friday afternoon traffic, and pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks. The city was alive with energy, and David felt grateful to be part of its business community. He'd chosen Premier National Bank for several reasons. They had a strong reputation and branches throughout the region. Their leadership team seemed progressive and open to new ideas. Most importantly, they appeared to value the kind of innovation that Digital Bridge Solutions could provide. David believed this partnership could benefit both organizations for years to come. The teller windows were busy with activity. Bank employees moved efficiently, helping customers with various transactions. David watched as people deposited checks, withdrew cash, and handled other routine banking business. Everything seemed normal and professional. The staff appeared courteous and helpful with each customer they served. David had always been patient when it came to business matters. He understood that good things took time and that rushing usually led to mistakes. His success had come from careful planning and attention to detail, not from cutting corners or pushing too hard. This approach had served him well in negotiations and would continue to guide him in future deals. As his turn approached, David organized the documents in his briefcase one more time. Everything was in perfect order, just as he preferred. His identification was easily accessible, and all the necessary paperwork was clearly labeled and arranged. He'd learned long ago that being prepared made every business interaction smoother and more professional. The bank's security cameras quietly recorded everything happening in the lobby. David noticed them positioned at various angles, providing complete coverage of the customer area. It was standard practice for financial institutions, and he appreciated the security measures that protected both customers and employees. Finally, David reached the front of the line. A teller window became available, and he stepped forward with confidence. This was supposed to be just another routine transaction, another step in building his business relationships. He had no way of knowing that the next few minutes would change everything he thought he knew about respect, dignity, and the power of individual actions to create lasting consequences. The afternoon sun streamed through the bank's large windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. David approached the teller window with the same professional demeanor he brought to every business interaction. His briefcase felt heavier than usual, not because of its contents, but because of the importance of what those documents represented. In just a few moments, he would discover that sometimes the most significant events in our lives begin with the most ordinary circumstances. David stepped up to the teller window with a warm smile, the same friendly expression he used when meeting new business partners. The woman behind the counter looked to be in her mid-30s, with blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun and a name tag that read Lisa. She was busy organizing papers on her desk and didn't look up immediately when David approached. "Good afternoon," David said politely, placing his briefcase on the small shelf in front of the window. "I hope you're having a good day." Lisa glanced up briefly, her eyes scanning David from head to toe in a way that made him slightly uncomfortable. There was something cold in her expression, something that didn't match the friendly customer service he'd experienced at this bank before. She didn't return his greeting or smile. "What do you need?" she asked curtly, her voice flat and unwelcoming. David maintained his professional composure, though he noticed the difference in her tone compared to how she'd spoken to the customer before him. He'd heard her laughing and chatting pleasantly with the elderly woman who'd just finished her transaction. The contrast was obvious, but David chose to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was having a difficult day. "I need to make a deposit and handle some account verification," David explained, reaching for his wallet. "I have all my documents ready." He pulled out his driver's license and placed it on the counter, along with his business banking cards and the deposit slip. He'd prepared. Everything was organized and professional, just as he handled all his business affairs. Lisa picked up his driver's license, but instead of the quick glance most tellers gave identification, she held it up to the light and began examining it with unusual intensity. She turned it over several times, studying both sides carefully. Her eyebrows furrowed as if she'd discovered something suspicious. "This doesn't look right," she muttered, loud enough for David and nearby customers to hear. David felt a knot forming in his stomach. "Excuse me? Is there a problem with my ID?" "I need to check this more carefully," Lisa said, holding the license even closer to her face. She was making a show of her examination, comparing the photo to David's face multiple times. Other customers in line began to notice the unusual attention his simple transaction was receiving. The businessman behind David shifted impatiently, checking his watch. The young couple nearby exchanged glances and whispered something to each other. David could feel their eyes on him, and heat began to rise in his cheeks. This wasn't how banking was supposed to work. "I've been a customer here for over 5 years," David said calmly, trying to keep his voice steady. "My identification is completely valid. I'm not sure what the concern is." Lisa ignored his explanation and continued her theatrical examination of the license. She held it up to different angles under the fluorescent lights as if she were some kind of forensic expert. The whole performance was becoming more uncomfortable by the minute. "Sir, you need to step back from the counter," Lisa said suddenly. her voice now carrying an edge of authority that seemed completely unnecessary for the situation. David was confused. He hadn't moved closer to the counter at all. He was standing, in exactly the same position as every other customer who conducted business at this window. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. I'm standing where I always stand." "Company policy," Lisa replied sharply, waving her hand dismissively. "Step back." The conversation was attracting more attention now. David noticed that other customers had stopped their own conversations and were watching the interaction with growing interest. Some looked concerned, others seemed curious about what was happening. A few people had pulled out their phones, though David couldn't tell if they were checking messages or recording the scene. David took a small step backward, though he felt ridiculous doing so. He'd never been asked to move away from a teller window before, and the request seemed arbitrary and unnecessary. The professional smile he'd maintained was becoming harder to keep in place. "Now, about this identification," Lisa continued, still holding his driver's license like it was evidence in a criminal investigation. "How do I know this is really you?" The question hit David like a slap. How do I know this is really you? He'd been asked to verify his identity at banks before, of course, but never with such suspicion and hostility. The question implied that he might be trying to deceive her, that he might be pretending to be someone else. "That's my driver's license," David said, his patience beginning to wear thin despite his efforts to stay calm. "It has my photo, my signature, and all the proper security features. It was issued by the state just 2 years ago. Anyone can fake these things nowadays," Lisa said loudly, making sure her words carried to the other customers. "We have to be very careful about fraud." The word fraud hung in the air like an accusation. David felt the eyes of everyone in the lobby focusing on him with new intensity. He was being treated like a criminal for trying to conduct routine banking business with his own valid identification. "Ma'am, I think there's been some misunderstanding," David began, working hard to keep his voice level and professional. "I'm a legitimate customer with valid identification. I've done business here many times before without any issues." But Lisa wasn't listening. She was holding his driver's license between 2 fingers now, as if it were contaminated with something unpleasant. She studied it one more time with exaggerated scrutiny, shaking her head slightly. Then, without warning, something happened that David would never forget for the rest of his life. Lisa held the driver's license out over the counter and, with a careless flick of her wrist, let it drop. The plastic card fell through the air and hit the marble floor with a sharp clicking sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet bank lobby. "Oops," she said flatly, making no move to retrieve. It slipped." David stared down at his identification lying on the cold marble floor. The small plastic rectangle that contained his name, his photo, and his legal right to prove who he was had been tossed aside like a piece of trash. The casual cruelty of the gesture left him momentarily speechless. The bank lobby fell into an uncomfortable silence. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The clicking of keyboards paused. Even the background hum of the air conditioning seemed to grow quieter. Everyone within sight of the teller window had witnessed what just happened, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. David looked up from his license on the floor to Lisa's face. She was staring back at him with an expression that held no apology, no embarrassment, and no acknowledgement that anything inappropriate had occurred. Her message was clear without words. She had the power in this situation, and she wanted him to know it. The moment stretched on, filled with the weight of disrespect and the sting of humiliation that David had never expected to experience in a place where he'd always been treated as a valued customer. David stared at his driver's license on the cold marble floor for what felt like an eternity. The small plastic card lay there between his polished shoes and the base of the teller counter, a symbol of everything that had just gone wrong. His heart was pounding, but not from anger. It was pounding from the realization that he was at a crossroads, and his next move would define who he really was. He could feel every eye in the bank lobby focused on him. The elderly woman near the information desk had stopped organizing her purse and was watching with concern. The young couple in line behind him had gone completely silent. Even the security guard by the entrance had turned his attention to the Scene unfolding at window number 3. David's first instinct was to demand an explanation. His second was to raise his voice and call out the obvious disrespect. His third was to ask for the manager immediately and make a scene that would ensure this teller never treated another customer this way. But David had learned something important during his years building his business. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one that surprises everyone. He took a slow, deep breath. The same kind of breath he took before walking into important board meetings or delivering presentations to potential investors. It was a technique his mentor had taught him years ago. When the world tries to make you react emotionally, the old man had said, that's exactly when you need to respond with your mind. David walked calmly around to the side of the teller counter. He didn't rush or make any sudden movements. He simply stepped over to where his license had fallen and bent down to pick it up. The marble was cold against his fingertips as he lifted the card and examined it briefly for any damage. Thank you, he said quietly to Lisa as he returned to his position at the window. His voice was steady and controlled, but loud enough for the other customers to hear. I've got it now. Lisa looked surprised by his calm response. She had clearly expected him to get angry or upset, maybe even to cause a scene that would justify her treatment of him. Instead, David was handling the situation with a dignity that made her behavior look even worse by comparison. Is there anything else wrong with my identification? David asked politely, holding the license out for her to see. I'd be happy to provide additional documentation if needed. The question hung in the air like a challenge wrapped in courtesy. Lisa took the license back, but this time she barely glanced at it before handing it back to him. Her theatrical examination from earlier had apparently served its purpose, though what that purpose was remained unclear to everyone watching. I suppose it's fine, she muttered, avoiding eye contact with David. Wonderful, David replied with the same professional tone he used in business meetings. Now, I believe I mentioned that I needed to make a deposit and handle some account verification. Should we proceed with that? Several customers in line were now openly staring at the interaction. David could hear whispered conversations starting up around the lobby. A woman near the loan officer's desk was shaking her head in obvious disapproval of what she'd witnessed. The businessman behind David was typing something on his phone, probably posting about the incident on social media. Lisa processed David's deposit with obvious reluctance, handling each document as if it required tremendous effort on her part. She took longer than necessary with every step, clearly hoping to make the transaction as unpleasant as possible, but David remained patient and polite throughout the entire process. Is there anything else? Lisa asked, when the deposit was complete, her tone suggesting that she hoped the answer would be no. Actually, yes, David said calmly. I'd like to speak with your branch manager, please. The request was delivered without anger or threat, but it had an immediate effect on Lisa's demeanor. Her face went pale, and she glanced nervously toward the offices at the back of the bank. Is there a problem with your transaction? She asked, suddenly much more concerned about customer service than she had been a few minutes earlier. No problem at all, David replied, with a slight smile. I just prefer to discuss my banking needs with someone in management. It's nothing personal against you, of course. The phrase, nothing personal, was delivered with such polite precision that it somehow made it clear that it was, in fact, very personal indeed. David had learned the art of professional courtesy during years of business negotiations, and he knew how to make a point without raising his voice. Lisa looked around the bank lobby, probably hoping that the manager might be unavailable or busy with other customers. Unfortunately for her, Mr. Peterson, the branch manager, was visible through the glass walls of his office, clearly available for customer meetings. I'll see if he's available, Lisa said reluctantly. Thank you so much, David replied with genuine-sounding gratitude. I do appreciate your help with this. While Lisa made the call to the manager's office, David organized his documents and put away his identification. He noticed that several customers were still watching the situation with interest. A few people had pulled out their phones, and he suspected that video of the earlier incident might already be making its way onto social media. The thought didn't particularly bother him. David had always conducted himself in a way that he wouldn't be embarrassed to see on the evening news. His response to disrespect had been measured and professional, exactly the kind of behavior he tried to model for his employees and business associates. Mr. Peterson emerged from his office within a few minutes, walking toward the teller windows, with the hurried pace of someone who had been told there was a customer service issue to address. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and a concerned expression that suggested he took customer complaints seriously. "Good afternoon, sir," Mr. Peterson said as he approached David. "I understand you wanted to speak with me?" "Yes, thank you for your time," David replied, shaking the manager's hand with a firm grip. "I'm David Johnson, and I've been a customer here for several years. I wanted to discuss my experience today and explore some options for my business banking needs." The way David introduced himself made it clear that he wasn't just any random customer with a complaint. The mention of business banking needs immediately got Mr. Peterson's attention, as any good bank manager knew that business customers were often the most valuable relationships the bank had. "Of course, Mr. Johnson," the manager said, glancing briefly at Lisa before focusing his attention back on David. "Would you prefer to discuss this privately in my office?" "That would be perfect," David agreed. "I have some time right now if you're available." As they walked toward the manager's office, David could feel the eyes of the other customers following them. The young couple in line was whispering to each other, probably discussing what they had witnessed. The elderly woman near the information desk nodded approvingly at David as he passed, as if she understood exactly what had happened and respected how he had handled it. Lisa remained at her teller window, but David could see the worry in her expression. She knew that her behavior had been inappropriate, and now she would have to face the consequences of her actions. David settled into the comfortable leather chair across from Mr. Peterson's desk, placing his briefcase carefully on the floor beside him. The manager's office was spacious and professional, with awards and certificates covering one wall and a large window overlooking the busy street outside. The contrast between this respectful environment and what had just happened at the teller window couldn't have been more obvious. "I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience you may have experienced today," Mr. Peterson began, his hands folded on the desk in front of him. "Can you tell me what happened?" David appreciated the manager's direct approach. No beating around the bush, no defensive attitude, just a straightforward request for information. It reminded him of the kind of professional communication he valued in his own business dealings. "Well, Mr. Peterson," David began calmly, "I came in today for what should have been a routine transaction. I needed to make a deposit and handle some account verification. Nothing complicated or unusual." He paused, choosing his words carefully. David had learned that in business, how you present information is often just as important as the information itself. Facts delivered calmly and clearly were more powerful than emotional outbursts. "Your teller, Lisa, seemed to have concerns about my identification. She examined my driver's license with unusual intensity, questioned its validity, and then accidentally dropped it on the floor." David's voice remained steady as he recounted the events. "When I say dropped, I mean she let it fall from her hand onto the marble floor and made no effort to retrieve it or apologize." Mr. Peterson's expression grew, more serious with each detail. As a banking professional with over 20 years of experience, he knew that customer service incidents like this could have serious consequences for the bank's reputation and business relationships. "That's completely unacceptable," the manager said, shaking his head. "I want you to know that this behavior doesn't represent our bank's values or standards. We pride ourselves on treating every customer with respect and professionalism." "I appreciate that, Mr. Peterson," David replied, "and I want you to know that I handled the situation as calmly as I could. I didn't raise my voice or create a scene, but I felt it was important to bring this to your attention." What David didn't mention, and what Mr. Peterson couldn't possibly know, was that the man sitting across from his desk was far more than just another customer with a complaint. The briefcase on the floor contained documents that could transform Premier National Bank's entire future. Inside that leather case were contracts, technical specifications, and partnership agreements that represented 18 months of careful negotiation and planning. David Johnson wasn't just the owner of a small tech company. Digital Bridge Solutions had grown into one of the region's most innovative and successful technology firms. They specialized in creating software solutions for financial institutions, helping banks modernize their systems and improve their customer service. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on David as he sat in the manager's office discussing poor customer service. For the past year and a half, David's company had been working closely with Premier National Bank's executive team on a revolutionary partnership. The bank had selected Digital Bridge Solutions from among dozens of competitors to handle their complete digital transformation. It was a $2.3 billion contract that would modernize every aspect of the bank's operations, from their customer service systems to their security protocols. The partnership wasn't just about money, though. The financial impact was enormous. It represented a chance for Premier National Bank to become a leader in financial technology innovation. David's team had developed cutting-edge software that would make banking faster, more secure, and more convenient for customers. The system would eliminate many of the frustrations that customers experienced during routine transactions. David thought about the presentation he'd given to the bank's board of directors just 3 weeks ago. The room had been filled with executives, all eager to hear about the future of their institution. He'd explained how the new technology would improve customer satisfaction, reduce wait times, and provide better security for sensitive financial information. The board had been impressed, and several members had personally thanked him for his company's innovative approach. The final contracts in his briefcase had taken months to negotiate. David's legal team had worked with the bank's attorneys to create agreements that protected both organizations, while allowing for the kind of creative collaboration that would make the project successful. His technical team had spent countless hours designing systems specifically for Premier National Bank's needs. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Peterson continued, I want to assure you that we'll address this situation immediately. Lisa will receive additional customer service training, and I'll be reviewing our procedures to make sure this doesn't happen again. David nodded politely, but his mind was racing. He was thinking about the 3,000 employees at his company who were counting on this contract for their job security. He was thinking about the bank's customers who would benefit from the improved systems his team had developed. He was thinking about the months of work that had gone into building this partnership. Most of all, he was thinking about what had just happened at the teller window and what it revealed about the bank's culture. How could an institution claim to value respect and professionalism when their frontline employees felt comfortable treating customers with such obvious disrespect? How could they promise excellent customer service while allowing behavior that was clearly discriminatory? David had built his company on the principle that every person deserved to be treated with dignity, regardless of their background or appearance. He'd made sure to hire employees from diverse backgrounds and create a workplace where everyone felt valued and respected. It wasn't just good business sense. It was the right thing to do. The contracts in his briefcase represented more than just a business deal. They represented his company's values and his personal commitment to making the financial industry more inclusive and accessible for everyone. But how could he partner with an organization that allowed its employees to treat customers the way Lisa had treated him? I appreciate your concern, Mr. Peterson, David said finally, but I have to ask you something. If this is how your employees treat customers on a regular day, what does that say about your bank's commitment to the values you just mentioned? The question hung in the air between them. Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable, probably realizing that this conversation was about much more than just one customer service incident. Mr. Johnson, I want you to know that Lisa's behavior today was completely inappropriate and doesn't represent how we want our customers to be treated. We take these situations very seriously. David believed that Mr. Peterson was sincere, but sincerity wasn't enough. Actions had consequences, and the action he'd witnessed today had revealed something about Premier National Bank that couldn't be fixed with additional training or revised procedures. As he sat in that comfortable office chair, David made a decision that would change everything for both organizations. It wasn't a decision made in anger or frustration. It was a decision made with the same careful consideration he brought to every important business choice. Sometimes, David realized, the most important partnerships were the ones you chose not to pursue. David walked out of Mr. Peterson's office with a polite handshake and a promise that the bank would look into the matter thoroughly. The manager had been apologetic and professional, but David's mind was already made up. As he crossed the marble lobby where his driver's license had been carelessly dropped just an hour earlier, he carried his briefcase with a weight that went far beyond its physical contents. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the bank's windows as David pushed through the glass doors and stepped onto the busy sidewalk. The city moved around, him with its usual Friday energy. People hurrying to catch buses, couples making weekend plans, business professionals finishing their last meetings of the week. But David felt disconnected from all of it, as if he were moving through a world that had fundamentally changed in the space of a single afternoon. He sat in his car for several minutes before starting the engine, staring at the bank building through his windshield. The Premier National Bank logo gleamed in gold letters above the entrance, representing an institution that had served the community for over 50 years. In just a few moments, David would make a decision that would alter the trajectory of that institution forever. Back at his office, David's assistant noticed that he seemed quieter than usual. She asked if the bank meeting had gone well, and David simply nodded, offering no details about what had transpired. He closed his office door and sat behind his desk, looking at the briefcase that contained what should have been the biggest celebration of his company's history. The contracts inside represented more than money or business success. They represented the culmination of years of hard work, innovation, and relationship building. His team had poured their hearts into developing technology that would revolutionize how banks served their customers. The software they'd created would eliminate the kind of inefficiencies and poor service that plagued many financial institutions. David opened his laptop and began typing an email to Robert Chen, Premier National Bank's Chief Technology Officer. Robert had been David's primary contact throughout the 18-month negotiation process. They'd developed a genuine friendship based on their shared vision for the future of banking technology. Robert had championed David's company within the bank's executive team and had personally vouched for their capabilities. "Dear Robert," David began, then stopped. "How do you explain that you're walking away from a $2.3 billion partnership because a teller dropped your ID on the floor? How do you make someone understand that respect and dignity aren't negotiable, regardless of the financial stakes involved?" David deleted the draft and started again. This time he kept his message simple and professional. He thanked Robert for the opportunity to work together and explained that after careful consideration, Digital Bridge Solutions would be withdrawing from all negotiations with Premier National Bank. He cited fundamental differences in organizational values, without providing specific details about what had happened that afternoon. The email was sent at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Robert wouldn't see it until Monday morning, but by then, the consequences would already be in motion. Over the weekend, David called his legal team and instructed them to formally terminate all agreements and contracts related to the Premier National Bank partnership. He asked them to handle everything quietly and professionally, with no public statements or press releases. This wasn't about revenge or publicity. It was about integrity. On Monday morning, David gathered his senior staff for an emergency meeting. He explained that they would no longer be pursuing the Premier National Bank contract and that they needed to focus their energy on other opportunities. His team was shocked and confused, but they trusted David's judgment enough not to question his decision. "Sometimes," David told them, "the partnerships we don't pursue are just as important as the ones we do." Meanwhile, at Premier National Bank, the impact of David's decision was beginning to ripple through the organization. Robert Chen stared at his computer screen in disbelief, reading David's withdrawal email for the third time. He immediately called David's office, but David's assistant politely explained that Mr. Johnson was unavailable and would not be taking calls about the terminated partnership. Mr. Peterson, the branch manager, was equally confused when he learned about the withdrawal. He'd thought his conversation with David had gone well, and he couldn't understand why a customer service incident would lead to such a drastic business decision. He requested the security footage from Friday afternoon, hoping to better understand what had actually happened at Lisa's teller window. Watching the video was painful for Mr. Peterson. He saw David approach the window with courtesy and professionalism. He watched Lisa's unnecessarily aggressive examination of the driver's license. Most painfully, he witnessed the moment when Lisa casually dropped the ID on the floor and made no effort to retrieve it or apologize. The video made it clear that this wasn't just poor customer service. It was a deliberate act of disrespect that revealed something troubling about the bank's culture and training. Mr. Peterson realized that David's decision to withdraw from the partnership wasn't an overreaction. It was the response of someone who understood that character and values couldn't be separated from business relationships. Lisa was terminated immediately, but the damage had already been done. The bank's executive team spent weeks trying to understand how they'd lost such a valuable partnership. They offered to renegotiate terms, promised enhanced customer service training, and even suggested bringing in outside consultants to review their policies and procedures. David politely declined all their offers. His decision wasn't about punishment or negotiation. It was about recognition that some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. Trust, once broken, requires more than apologies and promises to repair. Within 3 months, David had signed a similar partnership agreement with Metro Trust Bank, Premier National's biggest competitor. Metro Trust's executives were thrilled to land such a prestigious technology contract, and they made sure that every employee understood the importance of treating all customers with respect and professionalism. The transformation of Metro Trust Bank's customer service became a model for the entire industry. Their wait times decreased, customer satisfaction scores soared, and they gained a reputation as the most innovative financial institution in the region. Other banks began trying to poach David's company for their own digital transformation projects. Premier. National Bank's quarterly reports told a different story. The loss of the Digital Bridge Solutions partnership created a gap in their modernization plans that took years to fill. They eventually found another technology firm to work with, but the replacement contract was smaller, less innovative, and significantly more expensive. The bank's leadership learned a harsh lesson about the true cost of poor customer service. They implemented comprehensive training programs and revised their hiring practices, but they never forgot the partnership that slipped away, because one employee chose disrespect over dignity. David never spoke publicly about what happened that Friday afternoon. He didn't give interviews about the incident or use it as a marketing opportunity for his company. The story spread through business circles anyway, becoming a cautionary tale about the importance of treating every customer with respect, regardless of their appearance or background. Years later, when business students asked David about the decision that changed his company's trajectory, he would simply say that success isn't just about making money. It's about building relationships based on mutual respect and shared values. Sometimes, he would add with a slight smile, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from a deal that compromises who you are. The empty briefcase that had once contained $2.3 billion in contracts now sat in David's office, as a reminder that dignity and self-respect are worth more than any amount of money.